get everything done. I try to get everything done by Sunday and back, or Saturday or Sunday. So I'll be doing that. Then um so we'll go ahead and just take a look at the module for this week. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Hi, Melson. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Do you have any questions about the readings or material so far for this week?
Not yet, I don't.
Okay, we're gonna take a look at the module for this week. So there are just a few poems, and I was just telling Haley that I haven't gotten to the papers yet. I'm gonna start working on those tomorrow night. I'll try my best to get in for the paper. It may just be that the other assignments that I'll make sure to get all those back um by the end of this week. It may be into next week by the time I get through all the papers, possibly, but hopefully, it'll be possibly the end of this weekend. That is my goal, or early next week that I'll get the papers back. I'm going to start on those tomorrow night. So this is the module for this week, and so I did put the poetry in this module. Like if you didn't have the textbook, um, and so for this week, the poetry was to read John Donne, and then Those Winter Sundays and The Red Wheelbarrow. So John Donne, Robert Hayden, and William Carlos Williams. So those are three poets that we're going to look at today from different time frames. That John Donne is a poet from the Renaissance. Robert Hayden is a postmodern poet, and William Carlos Williams is a modernist poet. So they are all from somewhat different time frames. And so for this week, that there is a paragraph on John Donne, a quiz on interpreting poetry with literary devices, and you should be able to take that as many times as you would like, and then a video quiz on grammar. There are two short discussions, and with those, like, you don't have to, I always give extra credit if you do write more, but they don't have to be that long, and there are extra credit opportunities. I know I left the Shall I Compare Thee to the Summer's Day the same from another semester. I did update the one on I believe it was the Red Wheelbarrow. I updated that one. I believe the one on Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day has you watch a video. We'll take a look at that here in a minute. I'll go ahead and click on it. Okay, so this one has the quiz for week 7, and I'll also be updating the module for the next week, Thursday. So just make sure everything is in the module and all of that, and the dates and everything. Make sure the due date is the 24th for the grammar quiz, and then there is a quiz on poetry with literary devices. I did use the Red Wheelbarrow, Those Winter Sundays, and Batter My Heart in the Flea to make questions for this, but this video will definitely help just to kind of review that. There is a discussion on brevity in the Red Wheelbarrow. I mean, there's two discussions because I didn't last week, because I know you had the paper. I decided to just kind of that I did not add the Sonnet 18 one, just because there was already so much other stuff for you to do. That was more important at the time, was to get the paper finished and complete. This is the paragraph on John Donne, and it would. The PowerPoint is pretty in depth, so you probably would get some good ideas from the PowerPoint too, and we'll talk about it some. And basically, we'll first of all just kind of look at the discussions, and then we'll look at this too. So we'll take a look at the discussions here, because there are two discussions. Like I said, they can just be, I think, if you just answer in a few sentences, 3 or 4 sentences, I do sometimes specify, but they don't have to be that long of an answer. So this one I did leave the same. I did not make it like a direct question. This one is a more creative assignment, and there's the one option is you watch the video, and I believe the video I chose, as long as it still works, was I think Taylor Swift, some sort of adaptation of the Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day. So you can choose one or the other. And the first option is if you choose to respond to the film video, interpret how the themes and symbols or techniques in the poem correlate to the scenes in the video. So basically, you just be watching the video and analyzing it, or you may use real world approaches when creating a video based on social media. So the video is right here, and then you may make your own video if you would like to re-envision. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day based on the audience purpose and context in our world today? And that's what the video kind of does. And for the discussion on the red wheelbarrow, this one I did modify. I focus on how just the word brevity, and because the poem is so short that, but there's so much meaning that you can find in it, different meanings you can find in it. Again, so I focus on a modern. You can choose to write about a modern interpretation of brevity or an ancient interpretation. So for the modern version, the question is, can the red wheelbarrow be seen as an allegory that expresses the nature of brevity in our world today? And then you can also read question 2 on page 893 of your textbook and answer it accordingly in the discussion, and respond to 2 peers. Focus on the syntax too, and the individual words that stand out. Or you could answer this prompt here. There's an article I found on Cicero that he talks a lot about brevity. And then the question is, can Williams's modernist poem be seen to express sentiments similar to Cicero's ancient view of brevity? If so, can Platonic abstract concepts still be seen in the concrete poem? Why or why not? And I would definitely have to argue that there you can see some abstract concepts in it, despite the fact it just looks so concrete. Even the glazed rainwater, that holds symbolic meaning as well of some abstractions in the poem, or it makes it appear to like the representation of surviving through a crisis, and just being able to be renewed and refreshed, or the idea of redemption because the chickens were saved from the storm that came through, things like that. You could still say no, that you disagree, and make some good points there as well. But you can definitely see some abstractions, even though that the poem is very concrete. In fact, the red wheelbarrow is an images poem. Um, this is also a bonus portion too, that you find a image from media that you can connect to the red wheelbarrow and explain, like this, like an emergency situation like this. I know that there's a movie that I think The Fault in Our Stars, they actually recite this poem just to connect it to media, and that was based on a medical crisis, because I believe the girl in it had cancer or something like that. So you can connect it to find ways that you could see poetry in film and media still today. And when we get to Sylvia Plath, that there are still some singers that use her as an influence, like I pegged Lana Del Rey, and I believe Marina and the Diamonds is another one that I found. So that just makes it more interesting if you could find other types of sources, or even books that focus on it. There are fiction books even that I know one that I had read a while back, even though it was about a poet we're not studying, Baudelaire, but there's a whole fiction book based on this French poet's life. And so I'm sure it still had some of his actual poems mentioned in it. So you can still connect it to modern culture in interesting ways too. And that always makes it more appealing to be able to make those connections. Um, so let's also just go back to the module. So we talked about the discussion. Do y'all have questions about the discussions for this week so far?
So far, I'm okay.
Okay. All right, and then let's look at this assignment here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to find the flea and batter my heart. So with this particular poet, that he is a very complex poet. That in the first reading, the flea, this poem does not really have any sort of connection to religious ideology, even though that there are some allusions to religious ideology. It is, not promoting morality in the regular sense of things, and we see that even with some of the Shakespearean sonnets too. Not the one that we read last, but his sonnets to the Dark Lady. Though that actually he chastises her for her morality, and this one is kind of the opposite because it's a man pursuing a young woman, and basically that we see that this particular poet is conflicted, because he wants to find divine love, and that's what the quandary of a lot of these ancient poets or Renaissance poets, that they're all having this quest to find eternal love, and that the flea is one of his poems that's on his journey to find out what love is, trying to find God, or and so forth, and understand what eternal love is. And so that Batter My Heart grapples with that. So we see that Dawn kind of just focuses a lot though on some humanist concepts, and the humanists, though, they elevated what is human, or the human condition, over the divine. So we definitely can say that the flea is an individualist poem, and it is representing humanism, because the man in the poem, that he cares more about his desires than what is actually moral and correct. And so we see how it is a very unconventional poem, and that's what makes it unique. So we definitely see individualism in it as well. Um, and It is a metaphysical poem, that he writes metaphysical poetry. Um, and so that is noted as well, because of the fact that he is focusing on the elements and how they kind of dictate things. And so basically, that Don's poetry is known for its complex metaphors, intricate wordplay, and an exploration of themes related to love, death, and religion. And even the flea, that there's a connection to death, love. There are some religious allusions, but it is not what you would call, it's like I said, it's elevating the human condition, the fallen human condition, over morality, in an unconventional way. And then there's satire in it, with the metaphor of the flea in it. It was very untraditional, especially at that time. And his works do reflect the humanistic ideals of the English Renaissance. So that is something to make note of also. In this particular paragraph here, that some terminology that I did put is his fanaticism, because you can definitely connect, because he does actually have, so he transitions to religious fanaticism, so to speak, in the poem Batter My Heart. That fanaticism reveals to Dawn that that poetic making itself may prepare for, but also necessarily postpone, the self-loss required for violent martyrdom. So in that sense, he transitions from earthly love and desire for a woman, to trying to make that same connection with God, and trying to find everlasting love, and it becomes actually pretty almost violent in the metaphysical poem. So like he transitions a lot there, and just connecting a new historicist perspective would be, and new historicism is a method of literary criticism that emphasizes the historicity of a text by relating it to the time, place, and culture. Um, and then also the concept of self-annihilation. And so Donne uses the sonnet to experiment formally with the self-annihilation required for the performance of God's violent will, and that's shown, like I said, in "Batter My Heart." So that's why I put that term in there. And then libertinism. This is what we see in the Flea, and then so libertine practices or habits of life disregard authority or convention in sexual or religious matters. So we definitely see libertinism in the Flea because he doesn't really have any regard for religious matters in that one, even though we see some allusions to it. He really disrespects the sanctity of marriage in it and is trying to convince her that what they would have, the lady, is by being together and not being married in that intimate way would actually be their connection would be stronger, and making this connection of of the flea metaphor, and claiming that she has killed the flea, by basically, rejecting him and saying that their connection, when a flea bites both of them, that in that way their blood is in the flea, so they're connected, so that their relationship wouldn't be any more harmful than something like that. But yet she has killed the flea because he would reject his his pursuit of her, and because he doesn't want a conventional traditional marriage, um, and he knows that her parents would not agree to it and so forth. So that basically that's what the flea is. It's definitely what you call libertinism. And then we then see he transitions to fanaticism and the self-annihilation. Like I even kind of connected in the PowerPoint to even though with not really making this connection exactly, but just something that came to my mind was Martin Luther, that he actually scourged himself, and because of his um before he actually became a professing Christian, but because I believe of his hatred of his own sin nature. But obviously that is something that he did, and the violence and the other poem, even though he's trying to know God, is very similar to that. I mean, he did have a Catholic background, and I did write about that in the PowerPoint too. There are some scholars that say that, talking about religion, that that he some say that they think he's more an advocate for Protestantism, and then other people say no, he had the Catholic background, so really he's more of an advocate of that, with the way that he tries to connect with the divine there and everything, in that particular poem, "They Batter My Heart." So that's kind of a debate among scholars, and that's why I connect it to the paragraph, so you can kind of make up your mind, because you could argue either way. And so that, he does really instigate kind of a cosmological debate, in terms of, of the creator, his questioning of things, and then his rationale, and the plea. We've talked quite a bit about that, and there is a lot of literary techniques. So we see anaphora in the flea. It begins with the anaphora mark, but this flea and mark in this. So mark, that the phrase that begins with mark is repeated twice in the same sentence. There is alliteration, that basically that we do see some alliteration, um, when he does repeat the first letter of some words, like "a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead." And we see anaphora and some alliteration, sin and shame. And see, that's emphasizing those words because they're important. And so any literary techniques will show you what words the poet's emphasizing, because they hold symbolic meaning. And then the metaphor encloistered in these living walls of jet, um, is also shown here. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added in sacrilege 3 sins and killing 3. So he's trying to say, mentioning the sacrilege of his desire to court her in that way, but then saying that she's killing the flea, in that way. So we know that he gives that the metaphor of comparing their relationship to the flea dying because she's of her rejection of him. And then I did find a biblical allusion, purple thy nail and blood of innocence, which could have a biblical allusion to the cross and whatnot. And so, like I said, that this poem is, like I said, very far away from the cosmological debate that he really has. And the next poem, and there are conceits also, and I also did put that in the PowerPoint too. That there are there are two different conceits in each poem. And the flea that he that that blood equates to the entire body, and that a flea equates to a marriage is connecting to the metaphysical nature, and the conceit of the flea, which has sucked blood from the male speaker and his female lover to serve as an extended metaphor for the relationship between them. And then the conceit and batter my heart is is basically, when you look at that one, it's on an actual particular line. Yeah, the red wheelbarrow is on 889. That batter my heart, I believe, is on 907. They didn't put these poems next to each other. Yeah, here it is, or in 908. So basically, that they continues. I liken usurp town to another do, labor to admit you, but oh to no end. So the usurp town is actually the conceit there in that poem. And so with the batter my heart, and then there at the end there is a couplet in the flea, and that is a sonnet. The flea is a sonnet. It's a 14-line poem that actually is longer than a 14-line poem. Excuse me, but it is a metaphysical poem. It does have some conventions of the sonnet in it. It's not an actual sonnet. It's just they just categorize it as a metaphysical poem. And it is about love, though it's not the conventional sense. But Shakespeare, and we already talked about the sonnet because he has a 14-line poem, and the particular rhyme scheme, the A B A B C D C D E F E F G G rhyme scheme. But there are some conventions of the sonnet just based on the fact that the theme is on love. And Batter My Heart actually is 14 lines. So we see the sonnet form more in that poem than the flea. They're both metaphysical poems, so that's the genre. And Batter My Heart, Three-Person God is what the title of the next poem is. And basically that there is a lot of metaphysical concepts and kinesthetic imagery of motion. This is shown especially in line 3, when it says that I may rise and stand, or throw me and bend. You're forced to break, blow, and burn. So we see that alliteration, break, blow, and burn. So if you're writing about that, those 3 words would really focus on how he's wanting God to break him down to then find himself and who he is. So he's actually asking for God to break him down, and then to in order to find out who he is, um and basically overcome any gaps in his faith. And he says, I liken usurp town to another do, labor to admit you, but oh to no end. Reason your viceroy, and that's a footnote, one who rules as the representative of someone of high rank, but is captive, and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain. And that footnote is gladly but am betrothed unto your enemy. So you basically saying that he's making the connection here and the metaphor of the comparison being betrothed to the adversary, and then connecting it to marriage imagery. So we have the relationship with God. He connects that with marriage imagery, and so he says, "Divorce me, untie or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I accept you enthrall me, never shall be free." So, and this one that there still is some really unconventional ways, or he approaches, his relationship with God in a very intimate way. But we see once again all of these concepts of the fanaticism and self-annihilation, particularly, wanting to be broken down as a person, then to be able to find God, and then also we see some libertinism because of the marital imagery too. That's rather unconventional, not a traditional approach, and so we see all of these things here in these poems. So in the paragraph, you would have a topic sentence that should explain the purpose of having a new historicist approach to explore Don's fanaticism and libertinism in connection to the cosmological debate. Then give some context, so present background context surrounding Don's metaphysical sonnets and religious views in connection to the historical and cultural context based on his desire for religious freedom. So some scholars do focus on, wanting that he is, in a sense, wanting freedom similar to the Protestant Reformation in a way, because of his unconventional approach there, while others say no, that his views are more aligned with his Catholic past. And so that, like I said, I did put information on that in the PowerPoint and on the cosmological argument. So some scholars do indicate that he did vouch for Protestantism despite his Catholic background, identified the terms libertinism and fanaticism based on how they tie into his cosmological argument. So, like in the Flea, you could almost say that he's almost, because of his humanist approach, he's questioning things, and then he still is questioning things in Batter My Heart, but it takes a different turn. And also you can tie in a reference to collective truth and the Cartesian mind-body problem. So you definitely could say that Don does believe in collective truth, because he does tie his ideas into some sort of faith-based ideal, even though we still see that idea of libertinism and the fallen state in his work. But in general, that that he still, despite his unconventional approach, that you can still see some collective truth in it, and that's what scholars do say. Though that we see some individualism in the way he wrote The Flea, that he still believes in collective truth, but he is having this mind-body problem similar to what Descartes contrived, and Descartes actually came after John Donne. But you do see some of the mind-body problem that Descartes later describes in his works. That becomes a metaphysical issue, is that mind-body problem. That the mind-body problem is the problem of understanding what the relation between the mind and body is, or more precisely, whether mental phenomena are a subset of physical phenomena or not. And that's kind of his quandary. So that kind of sums up his metaphysical issue and connection to the cosmological debate too. He has some Cartesian thought in there that is interesting. And let's see that then you want to claim. So you want to create an argument either defending John's metaphysical critique by either supporting his libertinism in connection to a desire for religious freedom, or a critique of his fanaticism in connection to self-annihilation and skepticism based on your interpretation of his cosmological argument. So you're just critiquing his cosmological argument, and then focusing on the syntax and the sentence structure and with any sort of words and semiotic patterns in the text. And then cite an example from either Don's poem directly or in one of the sources, lead into the quote. And then you cite Don in the line or the author's last name in the page. And actually, you do want to comment if you cited Don, and you would cite Don, comma line, and then if you're just citing from the textbook, you would just put author's last name and page, depending on which source you're using. And then after that, you would just explain how your interpretation of Don's cosmological debate and his poems contributes to scholarship based on a new historicist approach. And then you just re-quote the diction that stands out, explicate the diction. So you always start with something like after the quote, this shows that or illustrates, then really dive into the words that are symbolic or they're proving your point, re-quote the words or the imagery and explain how they prove your point. Make note of any patterns that you see, and then you conclude by summing up the main point. But with the cosmological debate, I believe that in here I did talk about his connections to, I know I talked about his connection to Cartesian thought. At the end, I did connect it to Descartes' metaphysics. There is one poem that directly ties in to Descartes' metaphysics that some scholars write about, and that's Don's anniversary poems. However, you can still see that actually there's the Cartesian vortex theory in Batter My Heart, though that's not a direct, it's not directly saying you could still connect it because he is, talking about the creator and all that metaphysical imagery. If you look at that theory and see what he wrote, it is very similar. And there is another poem that he wrote that more clearly and specifically that some scholars have claim that he is referring to this Cartesian thought, and then others do say that he does focus on collective truth, despite some of his individualistic approaches to writing poetry. And this assignment is due on the 22nd. So you have the two short discussions, like I said, they don't have to be long, and then one paragraph, and then there are two quizzes. And then there is Robert Hayden's poem and the Red Wheelbarrow. Do y'all have any questions so far about the assignments? Ava, do you have any questions? I know you just you came into the meeting later.
No, I don't have any. Also, I'm sorry for showing up late.
That's okay. I just want to make sure if you had any questions that I asked you, because I didn't want you to come to the meeting and not be able to ask questions. So with this PowerPoint is on those winter Sundays and the Red Wheelbarrow. So those winter Sundays, it does talk about, in a way, it's just really focusing in on the nature of the family unit and once again what love is. So the theme is about love. It's about regret and love. And let me find the page in your textbook. But there's a lot of literary techniques in this one. There is a term called synesthesia. And so that's basically the language when it says like the blue, black, cold. So basically it's it's like this is isotonic language that is that you can't really see a blue, black, cold. Like cold cannot be blue and black. And so we do see some different poetic terms. There's consonants and assonants. So like I said, that basically that's internal rhyme. That assonance is repetition of vowel sound. Consonants is repetition of consonant sounds. So synesthesia is the term used in literature when one sense is used to describe another. But basically that you see how, like I said, you can't have blue, black, cold. So that is something that's not visible. There is some irony in it. There's personification. The house is actually personified. So the house is painted like it is human. And we don't really know what actually happened in the house, that the speaker is regretting not having shown more appreciation for the things that his father did for him as a child. But we don't know if with the chronic angers of that house, that is a line that stands out in the poem. And we don't really know what took place over the years that might have, caused him to describe the house in that way. And we know that the relationship between the father and the son is also, it's also very distant. Um, and this poem is pretty much going to be a contrast to Sylvia Plath's Daddy, because this speaker in this poem, he wishes he could fix the relationship with his father. And Sylvia Plath's Daddy, she does not. She doesn't. That's not her goal. She would not have, even if, even though the speaker is sad because he's lamenting the time lost and that he can't go back and undo time and have appreciated his father more. In Plath's poem, that she's doing the opposite. But they're both about the same topics, and I know we'll read her poem later on here. I think that did I put? I think I might have left off the page for those winter Sundays. I put the red wheelbarrow. I thought I put the page for those winter Sundays that they're. Oh, here it is. It's 8:17. I'm sorry. I'm gonna fix this too. So I know I had it on here at one time, but I went back and adjusted it, and then that basically did not. It must have gotten erased. So those winter Sundays, that poem is on 872 of your textbook, and then the red wheelbarrow is on 889. And so those winter Sundays, once again, that we see how it's a lyric poem too. So the genre is a lyric poem, and there's just a lot of really good literary techniques that the poet uses that just you could really focus on if you decided to write about this particular poem at any point in time. And now this PowerPoint starts with William Carlos Williams first. I did try to connect the poem to the environment and things like going green or the housing project, other things that the wheelbarrow could represent here. And then in those winter Sundays, I did put a slide on synesthesia, so the blue, black, cold. That is something, like I said, that is hypersonic, not, I think I said isotonic. It's a hypersonic cold. So it's a supersonic or hypersonic cold, that you can't see that. And so with imagery that there is imagery that focuses on time and memory. There is regret, but you are left to question hopefulness or regret. We definitely see a lot of regret. And then identify imagery pertaining to the cold. What is it symbolic of? Sorrow or loneliness? So the cold represents, that the loneliness and that he has, and the sad feelings that he has, and remembering that his father would wake up early just to keep the house warm. And the alliteration here, bank fires blaze, also is, it shows that emphasis on the warmth in the house because his father was caring for them. And we we see the consonants too, with the repetition of the B sounds, bank and banked and blaze. And also the second stanza, I wake and hear the cold splintering breaking. So once again, those words really stand out: cold, splintering, breaking, and that's really, you can see that that's symbolic of the broken relationship, that it's breaking, and that everything is in slow motion in this poem. I even connected it in the PowerPoint to, like, it's almost like a dream, like a bad dream that he's having. He's reliving the past, and a lot of it, like the imagery of the blue, black, cold. Well, in a in a dream, that that would that, because it's not real, maybe that's representing of something from a dream, because it's so cold, and just the imagery, that these surreal imagery in it, and it is a postmodernist poem, and so the postmodernists did focus a lot on skepticism, so we definitely see that in this poem. This is after the world wars. The modernists responded to a fragmented worldview, and that they and we see that with the red wheelbarrow too, because the storm that passes through, is it could be symbolic also of the world wars, and how the chickens survived the storm, so that's like surviving the war. And then the translucent, the water, that the iridescent water that's left on the wheelbarrow, that's kind of changing the color of the red, to a new hopefulness or optimism, and just valuing the simplicity of life, at that point. So basically, that the images kind of, they wanted to just find value in simplicity and minimalism, and that's what we see with William Carlos Williams. With Hayden, he really valued and different rhythmical patterns and meter and tone, and experimenting with things like synesthesia. But I would definitely say that it's almost like a dream, like and especially with the nature of the synesthesia in it. And basically that, it goes on to read, this is line 7: when the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and rest. So basically, like, he is reliving a day in the life, um, and he's reliving the what life was like, and basically that, at first we see that, that he would slowly rise and rest. Everything is in slow motion and time, like that's why it says almost like a dream. Everything's in slow motion, and the fact that he would slowly rise and rest, and because, though, at that time he feared the chronic angers of the house, so the house is personified. And then he recalls in line 10, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So there's this anaphora at the end. What did I know? What did I know? It's emphasizing, how could he have known? And then we see that metaphor at the end of love's austere and lonely offices. Comparing love to something like, love's austere, or our offices. So basically that he is connecting love to things that are routine and everyday and ordinary, and yet he's basically saying it should not be that difficult, but yet it was for him at that age. And um that we do see that, that we that being a young person, that that sometimes that, obviously it is difficult for younger when you're younger to fully grasp what love is and appreciate others in that way. So he's rather harsh on himself, because he's not really showing himself mercy by saying, well, I was just young, I didn't understand all of the things, but now I've gotten all this experience. But yet you could still say that maybe he's going to benefit from this and learn to try to value other people that are similar to his father in his life and take that knowledge and wisdom with him the rest of his life. But yet, that question at the end, the rhetorical question, it's just kind of reinforcing the concept that, that he's just being rather harsh on himself. And seeing life in a really, mundane, routine way. Um, and and essentially, lacking love, seeing the seriousness of it, life and just the everyday routine. But yet, like I said, that there's the possibility that, like I said, even though in the end it seems like he's focusing on that, he could possibly take that knowledge with him and better himself, because he has learned wisdom from that experience in that point in time. Um, it's up to you what you think his tone is. Um, and there's a lot of alliteration. The blue, so they put on his clothes in the blue, black, cold, clothes and cold. Weekday weather, banked, blaze, when, were warm. Um, and then we see, actually, this line does not have, hopefully this line has alliteration, the chronic angers of that house. This line, who had driven out the cold, so this would actually, see, loves austere and lonely offices. Now that there is alliteration, loves austere and lonely offices, that love and lonely, they are repeated there. But we do see the assonance and consonants. We see the cracked hands that ached. The A sounds that are repeated, cracked hands ached. That we see assonance there. Um, so we definitely see a lot of imagery, the imagery of kinesthetic imagery. We see a lot of visual imagery in this. It has all the different types of imagery almost. I don't believe that smell is a part of it, but definitely visual imagery, kinesthetic imagery. We see some auditory imagery, that because the father does call for him. So like I said, that motion and time are really important in this, because it is, like I said, it's almost like the dreamlike imagery is very specific. There is it could be seen as an allegory for the Holocaust survivors too. So I thought that was unique also to put in the PowerPoint. And then with the red wheelbarrow, that poem is so short. It begins with, so much depends upon a red wheelbarrow. Blaze with rainwater beside the white chickens. That's all that is in this poem. It is 8 lines, and very few words. But basically that, we see the dependency on the red wheelbarrow. And the red wheelbarrow, the red color represents urgency. And then we see the great glazed rainwater, basically transforming it into basically a tool that can be seen maybe in a more modern light. So the red wheelbarrow is an ancient tool, and it's been preserved throughout time, so that surviving that storm represents that's still an ancient tool and it's still useful. And with all the new technology and within that time frame of modernism, the simplicity of using a wheelbarrow is pretty important. Also, I mean, also made the connection to even how it could represent class values because of the working class, and the red wheelbarrow obviously is used for labor. Um, and and so we see even maybe that it's representing of the government and the people that are protected by it. Other comparisons that you can make, and even you're tying in some Marxist criticism and things like that into it. But in general, it's a poem about survival and being able to cope with crises. And that's why I did connect it to the Go Green or the American Housing Project, Disaster Relief Fund, because you could see those as being representative of the storm in it. And so that was just a unique um, point I made there. And the images poetry that images they actually try to paint a picture. So we see that the red wheelbarrow and the glazed rainwater and the white chickens, those colors help to paint a picture. It's all about the red wheelbarrow. And images poems could actually make images out of the way they constructed the words in the poem. And they use one image to focus in on, usually and Ezra Pound founded Imagism. So he is the father of Imagism. And like I said, it definitely, just looking at these different styles of poetry, that you see that it shifted from the Renaissance style of being very detailed and ornate to um, William Carlos Williams' style, which is very simplistic and minimalist. But yet, some of the writers, even in the postmodern era, clung to some of those complex literary techniques like Donne uses and Shakespeare, among others, and in the past. And we see that with Hayden, that he still really focused on different syntactical elements to make his writing unique. And like I said, the hypersonic cold and the blue black cold is just, it's very innovative what he did with words, and and some of the paradoxes in that too as well. So that's just kind of an overview of the PowerPoints here. Do y'all have any questions?